Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Xi4P Podcast, the show where we take a look at comic books as guardians. I'm Nico, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Nico Action. That's NICOACTION.
Hey, and I'm Nathan. I'm just a simple Nathan, and I don't really have a name, but you can call me Mr. Nathan. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Dazzler AOA.
Well, sir, I believe you are as fancy as any talking horse, which lets the audience know we are, of course, here to discuss Jane Foster Valkyrie, or Valkyrie Jane Foster, however you want to look at it, Volume 1. Now, this consisted of issues 1 through 5, as well as the 6 to 8 page preview that was initially featured in War of the Realms Omega. Now, that creative team that covers all of this gets to be a little bit much. We have Jason Aaron and Al Ewing on all of the writing chores. Plus, we have a special appearance from Ron Garney, kind of, sort of, not really. I'm only throwing it in because I'm a Daredevil guy. You know, that's what I do, right? Then, of course, we have amazing art throughout the regular Valkyrie series by Cafu, Jesus Albertov, Ramon Perez, Cian Torme, Roberto Poggi, Fraser Irving, and letters by Joe Sabino all the way throughout. I love Jane. My love of Jane goes back a long time in the show. There's very little Thor I don't need to have and love and hold. But
look at them, they're so precious. Oh
I
my
know.
God.
New York Comic Con exclusive Korg and Meek for us to love. But here's my question for you. I come with my dad's, if I'm X-Men and Daredevil, my dad is Thor. You know what I mean? And my mom is a woman named Jane, and so this was kind of fated, right? Like, this was gonna happen for me. But what brought you to Jane Foster Valkyrie? Oh, by the way, of course, this is Trade Waiting, where we take a look at a trade after it's been released. Sorry about that, guys. I'm just so excited to talk about Jane the way it should be. What brings you to want to talk about Jane?
Okay, so me and Valkyries starts through where everything starts for me, X-Men, right? So like the New Mutants, and like I've always loved Danny Moonstar, blah blah blah. But she gets roped into a whole lot of Valkyrie adventures, and probably like my two favorite solid runs of the classic New Mutants are those classic solid Asgardian runs. So that kind of like started my oh, okay, I kind of like Asgard. I think this might be cool and interesting for me. Sorry, Nico. And the Avengers, like my favorite characters were always like Captain Marvel, Monica, or Wasp, or Scarlet Witch. I was always like, oh,
I understand.
on the team. But like just that, and then going through Defenders, like in reading all of that, like I really fell in love with Brunhilde. So like my love of Asgard at all comes through the Valkyries. So I'm like, hell yes.
And it's kind of hard to avoid Thor a little bit, kind of, maybe a little bit, sort of a little bit, if you're an X-Men fan. There's a number of ties back to Thor in the pages of X-Men, whether it's the famous Loki and Storm saga that connects to the Amazing New Mutants as Guardian stories that you were mentioning, or it's some of the time that the Simonsons traded characters back and forth, like where Iceman would find himself over in the pages of Thor. Excalibur even had a Thor crossover early on with a big old Enter Excalibur on the cover. Later on, Thor characters would occasionally intersect with X-Men, most notably in the Exiled Journey into Mystery's New Mutants crossover, which was pretty cool. And, that run of New Mutants, the Abnett and Lanning, which are not sure that you're allowed to put their names together like that anymore. But that run had something so unique, which was the Magma Mephisto dating thing.
Oh my God, that was like the craziest thing ever.
And I loved it. And I don't think you're supposed to love it, but I loved it. And so it was kind of great that we even saw Mephisto in this arc. So, there was a lot of little ties to things you might love about Avengers, X-Men, Thor, kind of intersectionality, right? Because it's all about how these universes come together and the bigger picture that they play, which is why in so many ways that this spawns out of War of the Realms is kind of important, kind of unimportant. For those who were playing at home, but maybe came a little bit late, Jason Aaron picked up the pen on Thor in the pages of Thor, God of Thunder. He ran Thor, God of Thunder for an amazing 25 issues, at the end of which Thor was no longer worthy. We spent 8 incredible issues plus 1 annual discovering who this new Thor was before ultimately finding out it was the Incredible Jane. We had Secret Wars, which would give us Thors, Secret Wars Thors, 1 through 4s, and that eventually
The Thor
relaunched.
cores
It was the Thor Core with all the Thor, including Store. And
and Dazzlor.
Dazzler. We should all be so lucky to be Dazzlor. And then we got the Mighty Thor, which ran like 1 to before becoming 700 to 706. Of course,
Yeah.
in that run of Thor, we come to see Quentin Quire,
Yes.
find out that the Phoenix is a whole lot more connected to the Thor mythos than any of us perhaps ever thought. And of course, Shi'ar Death Gods.
Who doesn't love Shi'ar Death Gods? I mean, holy shit. Like, I thought they reached the pinnacle with Death Commando Squad, but Death Gods, ugh.
It was everything I needed. It was so much Thor and so much X-Men, and it was all the X-Men I like and all the Thor I like. Couldn't have been happier. Of course, that probably has something to do with a gentleman by the name of Jason Aaron running both the pages of Thor, especially during the Jane era, as well as the pages of X-Men for a great long time. He was the writer on Wolverine for several amazing runs, as well as the forever immortalized as the spiritual bastard nephew successor to New X-Men by Grant Morrison. Jason Aaron's Wolverine and the X-Men is pinnacle, right? So
Hate Pride is the headmaster. Yes.
Oh, and it's just so good how, because we still have that Hellfire Club in so many ways. And okay.
Yes. Anyway,
we will trade weight Wolverine and the X-Men when the omnibus comes out in
We're
December.
talking about Jane right now.
Yeah, it's hard to think about the number of characters we love. And War of the Realms was kind of shocking for a million reasons, but I felt like they kind of made it that you didn't really need to read War of the Realms to jump in with Jane. Yeah. You could just kind of have a cultural understanding. Now, I know I recently went off on how fucked up War of the Realms X-Men was, which reads a lot like 3 issues of Rosenberg's X-Men. Like, it just does.
Yes.
It just is 3 issues of it.
It is.
Now, did you have a particular relationship with War of the Realms? Or was this sort of just like the thing that happened before you started reading Jane as Valkyrie?
I did, and it should have been an event I really loved. It featured, Dandy got to get back on the saddle. She got to get to be a Valkyrie again, even though, whatever. At the end, at least she didn't die. So, but the X-Men tie-in event it wasn't bad, but it was bad when you consider it with what Rosenberg was doing in Rosencanny during that run. Like, we had literally seen Rain die already before this mini, and we're like, oh, okay. And then she was really kick-ass, and she's like, I want to live, and then that whole thing happened. So and then my Brunhilde died.
Yeah. Oh, and Berto died too. Let's not forget Berto died so he could come back.
He died in
Yeah, but and Brunhilde's death was shocking, I guess, even though it shouldn't have been. She was such an unnecessary element of everything Ewing was building in Loki, everything Aaron was building in Thor. Her death was sort of an unfortunate stone on the path to finding a place for Jane in the Marvel universe, in a world where inevitably corporate synergy was going to require that Thor be the Odinson once more. Now, this War of Realms sort of Omega issue, right? It doesn't get collected with War of the Realms proper. That's 1 through 6. I think leaving this out is crazy, but whatever, right? I loved the introduction of Lisa. I loved introducing her working at the hospital. I also appreciated that this was one of the very few Thor appearances in this span. How did you feel about getting this 6 to 8 page kickoff for Jane at the start of this trade? Did it feel to you like the necessary road there? I mean, I couldn't imagine this trade working without this.
I think if you jump from the end of War of Realms into just the where the series starts, you would be like, what the fuck? Like the Omega issue, you really do need it to get like it's a oversimplified background, but like you need it to have something. Like you're just like, otherwise you're just like, what? And then it would become another like, okay, so how did Jane become Valkyrie story? And I like we already had that with her in the Thor, so we didn't need another like, how did this mystery happen again?
All of a sudden,
And
she just
like,
has Undrarm, and that's it.
yeah, and I have really gotten an appreciation for Lisa Halloran now. Like going back and rereading this, and like I'm like, oh my god, and she was America's ex-girlfriend. I'm like, holy shit! Like I missed some of it when I initially read it because I was like speed reading. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I was just waiting to get to like the part where like Mannequin shows up in issue 6 or 7. Like yeah, but it was a lot of fun. It was very necessary, very necessary.
And I really appreciate it. Just like you said, I just spent how many years sort of kind of reading Jane's slow origin to Thor and, witnessed her fall and her return. I didn't need another long drawn out origin for her. And I felt like this was a time where writers were starting to really realize we don't need the long drawn out origin. Look at how much of Hoxpox did what it did in just a couple of pages. This is what it is now. Move the fuck on. All of the cool stuff about Moira and the 10 lives and all of the cool stuff about how, there's a robot machine war coming. All of that's ancillary to we live on an island, no one dies, endless rebirth, and that's exactly what we got here. If they were like, and the Underarm gets its power from the All Mother, but in this matter of fact way, and Jane goes on a mystery hunt to get it, and it's a journey, and shut the
I
fuck
don't
up.
need all that anymore. No,
We just did it all.
tied in. She's tied in.
Yeah.
She's in the Thor universe. Just let her be.
And people don't realize that Jane had like 100 appearances before she became Thor. She was always doing her thing while Thor was off world or in space or in another dimension or, any number of things. This really was the first time where Jane rose to the occasion as a character on her own, and she shined. And I think it was really brave of Marvel to put her in her own book. Now, you're a Valkyrie purist, like not like you're like, no other Valkyries, but like you're a guy who loves classic Valkyrie. Whereas a lot of people, I feel like she sort of blends into that sort of, not to lump her in with other classic defenders, but she's sort of gargoyle, she's sort of one of those people that you could point to, like, oh, the gargoyle, right? Like that
You're
blonde
like, she's
lady
that Asgardian chick, like
with the
yeah.
sword and the
Spear
thick
thing.
thighs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Were
The
you
breastplates.
the breastplates? Oh man, if she doesn't look like she's ready to do a number on the Blonde Ambition tour, get off my book, right?
Right.
Were you nervous going into this about having to trade away what makes your Valkyrie Valkyrie? Or, was this an easy transition for you? Because for so many people, Valkyrie is like a title. It's not a person, but for many people, Valkyrie is Bruni, and they can't separate that idea.
I can always separate it. The thing I had the most problem going in with this one was that the weapon chose her to be a Valkyrie instead of it was always the horse was supposed to choose you to be a Valkyrie. So like that kind of stuck in my head a little bit, but once I got past that, which is comic books, whatever, they're changing stuff all the time. I mean, like whatever. Once I could get past that, and it was a quick, like, oh, okay, whatever, it's comic books. And it was good. I was like, okay, cool. There's been lots of people who've been Valkyries. Like Brunhilde was trying to create a whole team of Valkyries in the Fearless Defenders. So like,
Yeah.
why can't Jane be Valkyrie? Like, why not?
And, knowing what we know about where the Marvel Universe is going to move shortly after this, where we're going to, of course, get the incredible Runa, there was just sort of no way for us to keep talking. We did the Return of the Valkyries 1 through 4. And now we've done Valkyries 1 through 5, and
the Mighty Valkyrie, yeah.
Mighty Valkyries, right? And this is sort of the book that started it.
Yep.
And in so many ways, I love that it reads kind of like Aaron's Thor never ended. Down to the hero has a unique magic arm, And it ties back into this idea of what was the purpose of Mjolnir and what was the Mother Storm, and now it's Undrawn, and what is the purpose of this all weapon. And there are so many parallels where I feel like it does sort of just keep running those threads. And even like kind of a cute thing, I don't love the Charles Soule era of Daredevil. It just doesn't fit my aesthetic of the character. And then in comes Jason Aaron and Ron Garney with this War of the Realms, and I hear that Daredevil's going to be connected to it, and I'm like, no, I don't want that. I love Thor and I love Daredevil. I don't want that. And then War Scrolls is incredible somehow. And this whole thing with giving Daredevil the World Tree Billy clubs is so touching. It's one of my favorite Daredevil moments of all time. And so then, it was just such a nice thing that, like, if you read Omega and then you went to Valkyrie because you read Omega and you liked it, you still got yet more of Heimdall, right? And that was maybe what I thought this book was perhaps exploding with. And that's amazing guest spots. So this first issue is bangers because it starts with Valkyrie is Valkyrie, she's Jane and she's Valkyrie, and then all of a sudden it is like B-lister street level Palooza real quick. And they don't waste time, they move us through the story. But one thing that this series starts with and never slows up on, even now when we're talking about it in Mighty Valkyries, is what the fuck are these villains? Like, Bullseye is a great choice, especially because Daredevil, it connects. I'm with it. How did you feel about the number of guest spots? Because this is like The Love Boat starring Jane Foster.
It really is. Like, I'm still waiting on the episode where Charles comes on. Like, really, really need that. Like, come on. But like, seriously, like, when you start the issue off where, like, when you start the first issue, Bullseye has the magic sword and is riding on Mr. Horse, like, come on. Like, that is like the camp level I need. Like, so camp, and it's so fun, and he was still serious, like evil dick Bullseye, but like he was camp and fun at the same time. I was like, holy crap, where's this Bullseye been my whole life? Like, yes.
And that's the Bullseye that you can usually get in Daredevil. Once the Lesterification happened of Bullseye, once they said maybe he's not just crazy, he's actually like got a personality, and he's a fucked up dude named Lester. He's just there's actually a Bullseye figure right there in the background. That's my Daredevil line. It's Bullseye, Elektra, Natasha, and Daredevil. So I love my DD too much. But the thing about these guest spots that I think I liked the most was this had such a 70s feel. It was like silly and cute. And, I read the rest of that Omega issue just because I have to, because I'm neurotic. And, I'm a Loki guy. I like Loki a lot. I think I like to read Loki in hardcovers a little bit more because it's always a long con. So, whatever. But then I saw that Punisher kill crew. I saw Punisher kill crew, and I'm like, yeah, okay. And then I saw it was by Jerry Dugan, and I was like, oh, this probably wasn't the Marauders X-Men cable level hit that he's had more recently. But, it made me sort of think about the way that they were kind of trying to position this War of Realms thing as really having kind of a lasting impact. And I love the stage it puts Jane on, because Jane is kind of a who the fuck is Jane? And so, yeah, she should fight Bullseye, because why the fuck not, right?
Right.
So I did think what was interesting is that issue 1 kind of ends with the promise of Bullseye, and issue 2 is just a huge fight sequence between Jane and Bullseye.
Yep.
I don't want to sound course, right? But I can live with you breaking Mjolnir. That doesn't upset me. I can live with you shattering the Warhammer. These are things that I've read. I've read the War Thor Warhammer being destroyed, obviously. So like I know what these weapons symbolize, but the truth is I don't think I have a real relationship with Dragon Fang.
Mhm.
And so I maybe don't think I found Jane shattering it upsetting. I think I perhaps saw Jane's shattering of this very important mystical sword. Yeah, it's Jane's turn. She lets you go, right? Like, was the shattering of that sword, like, because it wasn't to me, so I don't feel that way, but like, I think it could to someone else. Did it read disrespectful in any way?
I don't think, and I'm not as versed in Brunhilde's Thor appearances, obviously, but in in all of her appearances, she never really, like, yeah, it was her sword, but like she never really, it didn't have that importance. It wasn't like this is the ebony blade or like this is Mjolnir, like oh, like it wasn't that. It was just like, yeah, this is just what I use. Like it didn't have that importance. So it being destroyed, I guess, was a good metaphor for passing of the torch, but it really didn't add anything for me. Although the more I do learn about Thor, the more I do realize how these weapons have their own like abilities and their own lore. So I'm sure if you were more versed in the Thor part of it, you would be a lot more maybe upset.
Because there's like a weight to it, you know what I mean? Like one
Yeah,
of the things that the X-Men don't really have are weapons, and the
yeah.
X-Men that do have weapons,
Skink
like
bub.
yeah, it's literally that. It's snicked or it's a take on snicked, you
Mhm.
know, and I don't mean to diminish anybody, but you've got like Summers style powers where they radiate or they blast. And then you've sort of got like Logan style powers where you've got the claws. Jubilee kind of has them with fireworks because I don't think
Yep,
of Jubilee as like like long distance fireworks. You know, Beast is something I was about to
yep,
say. The beastification of Hank, where he's more clawsy now, you know,
yeah,
and even when I think about what Storm's sort of hand to hand weapon is, it's either a dagger or it's her
right.
lock picks. It's little blades. You know what I mean? Sort of the over the top ornate weapon of it all is a Cap thing,
Yeah.
is a Thor thing. It's not, you know, Emma Frost isn't like, quickly, I must get my Fendi ancient shield. You know what I mean? It's not that
On to
level
the
of,
diamond, on to the diamond jet, my friends.
if she doesn't have an invisible diamond jet that's totally visible and just to remind you how much money it costs, it
Oh
is
yeah. Oh,
totally
absolutely.
visible,
It
then
is.
there's just no purpose.
I need that
You
to
know,
show up now in
I do
Marauders.
too.
Like,
Jerry, listen, buddy, we're totally cool with Punisher Kill Crew, so please do this for us.
yeah.
Now, okay, I want to segue to something else. I've long felt, and you know, it's one of those things where like even if you know that it's like the universe, right? Like there's so much more to life than the ability to point at something and say, isn't that beautiful? And the isn't that beautifuls are beautiful,
Yeah.
right? That Stan Lee and Jack Kirby have that unbroken run that then Bendis and Bagley chose to match instead of exceed. You know, those things are amazing that a single writer and a single penciler were able to come together and do this one thing this whole fucking time. But I find myself frustrated sometimes when it feels like a fill-in issue wasn't an intentional B team move. I
Yeah.
love the idea of a B team. Now, Cafu is such a brilliant artist, and Jesus Abertov did such exquisite colors that were such a specific thing that when the third issue saw the death of Heimdall at the hands of Bullseye, and Heimdall was like, I must go on a journey into mystery. I was like, I'm here for the pun, but make it worth it, right? Pun, but
Right.
make it fashion. So they go to heaven, and anybody who read Jane Thor knows that heaven played a really big role, not just in War of the Realms, but in Jane's mythology for it all. I loved that heaven is always depicted as the worst place you know. A beautiful worst place, but the worst place you know. So
The
like,
worst.
so essentially the Upper East Side. And I was kind of thrown off by the number of changes to the art here. I loved that it was used in a way that was like, oh, look, heaven is different. It's not regular world that's different. Two, it's an interpretation of heaven. And then we saw a little bit more art in that third style where Heimdall was transitioning into another dimension, right?
Yep.
But the constant 2-page spreads in the much cartoonier style kind of took me out of the severity of the arc, and it made the Heimdall story feel very much separated from issues 4 and 5. Number one, how do you feel about fill-in issues when they don't seem as planned? And even if this was planned, it just didn't smack like so planned to me. And number two, how did you feel both about this particular fill-in and, honest to God, the number of digital version making useless splash pages?
Okay, so when you look at what they're doing now in the Mighty Thors, I mean the Mighty Valkyries. Why did I say the Mighty Thors? The Mighty
because
Valkyries.
they are that fucking mighty.
Because they are. They're that amazing. When you're looking at the Mighty Valkyries, the two stories and the different art teams on them, like, I know it's not a fill-in issue kind of thing, but that flows for me because it's consistent and it's beautiful. And like, now I'm also too spoiled because now I see Jane in, like, without the beautiful art that's going on in the Mighty Valkyries. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, different art team. Beautiful,
so wonderful.
Done. Great,
right?
Great art, but it's just like the style is so, like, you're like, oh my god. But with the way that they did it in the Mighty Valkyries, it's been amazingly done and spread out, and it's consistent. So like, it may have been a thing to give like a fill-in sort of issue kind of thing spread out throughout the whole series. That was done beautifully. This was it wasn't bad art. None of it was bad art.
Never bad.
None of it was bad. It was just a little jarring, the change, and the splash pages did kind of detract from the story a lot bit. And I was kind of glad when they got away from it. But like, I did like seeing the different realms. I think one thing that we've seen recently is when they did in Ten of Swords, when they did the different realms during the other word battle. I forget if it was a Wolverine issue. I forget which issue it was, but they had the different artists do the different realms on it.
It was Wolverine because it was Josh that we love. Josh Cassara. Yeah.
Cassara, yeah.
It was Cassara just really bending all of our minds with that gorgeous battle between Wolverine and
Gollum, right? Yeah. So like, that was beautiful. That was beautifully done. That made sense. It wasn't overdone. I think when they went to these realms, it was a little longer than I would have liked to have seen. It wasn't like one splash page. It was very jarring to me, definitely.
Yeah, and I think, I have a bad memory sometimes about numbers. Like, I always feel like 5 is never the number of issues of an arc. Like, no one does a 5-issue arc. Everybody does the prologue and then 5 issues, or 5 issues and the epilogue, or it's 9 issues, a mini series, 2 annuals, because it kind of was like December, January, so they just did like neighboring annuals plus a couple of tie-ins and a B story at the end of another crossover. Like, I'm used to needing to buy 7 hardcovers to understand one issue.
Right.
So when I saw this was 5 issues, when I was like looking at my notes and I was looking back at it, it had that little bit of Omega at the beginning, but there was something about the split that occurs here that, the first 2 issues are the Bullseye story, and then issues 2 and 3 are kind of the Heimdall story, and then all of a sudden 4 and 5 are 1,000% the Zodiac. I'm so sorry about that. The Zodiac Mephisto story, right?
Right.
I loved the beauty of using the same language to release Heimdall on his journey into mystery so that he could see the universe from a side he's never seen. Number one, sadly ineffectual, because I know Heimdall can't be gone for very long.
Right.
Number two, maybe someone else has a better relationship with the Zodiac than I do.
Not me.
Okay, good. So the end of that issue kind of went like,
I was like, what?
like Wonder Man's brother? Like that the Zodiac? Oh.
Yeah. I was like, okay, so I love Grim Reaper as a character. There's a few West Coast Avenger arcs that I like dug him the hell out of, but overall he was just really a campy villain that you were always kind of like, okay, cool, quit featuring him. I know he's Simon's brother, like get him out of the book kind of thing. And like even the Lethal Legion was so much better when they didn't bring him back.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like he is a villain who constantly we see elevated to extremely high power levels very quickly. Like I really, I want to go on record as saying I give this arc an A- overall, right? My issues with the pacing are I maybe would have just treated it as 2 3 issue arcs instead of one big 5 issue thing. I would have just maybe separated it a little bit differently. But the arc that we get with Annabelle Riggs and seeing much more Lisa Holleran, getting to know Mr. Horse, who, okay, the moment where she goes, "You can talk," is literally the moment when Webbigail starts talking to the animals in the DuckTales pilot. It is levels of silly I had trouble with, but that fits a 70s comic. And you know what else fits a 70s comic? Let's just go to an art gallery showing, walk right in. Doctor Strange shows up and is like, "Oh no, I did my timing bad. We're all about to die."
So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that camp aspect. It seemed like a better written first 10 issues of the Dazzler series, right?
Okay,
so like,
yeah.
Okay. It seemed like a much better written, much less sexist, like Jane was the hero of her story, but it was like guest star, like ridiculous camp situations all over the place. And I'm a simple guy. I dig simple camp like that. So that was for me. I was like, yes, this is amazing. And I always like seeing Doctor Strange get taken down like a notch really quickly and easily.
Love it.
And I love that Simon Williams Brothers of all people was one of the was able to just like haha.
And because Strange never fucked with Mephisto directly, it still has that ring of damnation to it.
Yep.
So it still felt believable that he's propping him up. It's not just like out of nowhere, all of the villains are misappropriately battling each other. It's not just like acts of vengeance or anything.
Yep.
Like there's a reason shit's happening. What I also thought was like, I kind of like knocked everything off the fucking table when Caecilius, Adria, and Demonicus showed up. I did a little bit of research. Caecilius has barely appeared in 25 years. As a matter of fact, His only appearances in the last 25 years are vaguely as a result of the film. But the character himself, much like Jane, is a character that is better remembered for being from Doctor Strange than actually appearing much in Doctor Strange. It was interesting that one of my negative comments about the Doctor Strange movie in our coverage of Doctor Strange over on HTML, Husbands Talking More or Less, where myself and show contributor Kevo, my husband, take a look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe piece by piece, was I said that I sort of thought Caecilius being silly was dumb. No, he, Adria, and Demonicus are like actually silly. I love it now. That's really cute. And I love that it's Aaron pulling from Aaron's bigger picture. Aaron's always writing Doctor Strange. Ewing's always writing Doctor Strange. Yes. Did this weird little magic battle, this very, I know you're 70s, I know this is like up your alley, but like, how was this for you? Did it play out like a good version of that? Or was it maybe a little, they literally run away and go, this is too rich for our blood. We just needed to be reintroduced into the Marvel universe. We got to go. Was that a little too silly for you?
I mean, nothing's too silly for me, but it didn't that didn't serve a point for me because it was kind of like, oh, hey guys, remember us? Not many people do. Bye. Like, I was like, oh no, are they gonna die? Because like anytime somebody comes back from like 25 years, you're like, are they gonna kill him? Are they gonna kill him? Oh, they just died. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But I don't know. I loved the whole, like, I couldn't get past. I love that Damnation era Mephisto, like in the suit in Vegas, like. Everything about it, it's really hard for me to get past it and focus on anything else because I'm like, holy shit, Mephisto's kind of hot in this.
Oh yeah, I get what you were going for, Amara. Yeah. Girl, I'm with you. I get it.
Yeah.
Now, you know, the sort of conceit of it that I thought was interesting was the whole story starts with the idea that because she's Valkyrie, because she's saving lives by helping them transition over to death, she's having trouble saving lives and keeping people among the living. So as a doctor, she's been relegated to the morgue. So because she is a doctor who is too busy helping people not die and yet meet their death humanely in one avenue, she's held back from her ability to do it in the other. That made the fact that she was in a situation that she knew was, it was like any medical crisis. She was for certain going to lose the patient. This was going to be a crash situation. Now, I loved Lisa and Annabelle coming in and saving the day a little bit, helping her out because, who doesn't love girl power?
Yes.
But the highlight for me of this whole arc is what I read. A few people online had a problem with, but I personally think they're seeing it differently than I am. I thought how she defeated Reaper in this instance was just perfect. Yeah. It was just like, I don't want to torture, murder, kill, condemn to endless pain. I'm a fucking doctor. I'm not a prince. I'm not a man with a hammer. I'm a doctor with an all weapon. It can do anything, right? That sort of disconnect from violence is sort of funny in the fact that if I thought this arc had one thing too much, it was an unbelievable number of fight sequences I didn't need. There was a fight in issue 1, a fight in issue 2. All of issue 3 was a fight. There was a fight in issue 4. There was a fight in issue 5. The one thing I didn't need was more fighting, so that she managed to save the day without fighting. That's Jane for me. How did you feel about the resolution of this arc? They were able to get Strange out, and they even laugh at it. They're like, "Oh, break the mirror, magic." How did you feel about that resolution and Jane managing to do it in a way that almost purified William's spirit?
So I like that resolution for him. Like, the reason he keeps coming back over and over and over is because he's so tortured. So if you don't, I think if you didn't have that sort of ending for him, the cycle would just continue and continue. And even if you could kill him and condemn him to hell, he's gonna somehow get out. Somebody's gonna bring him out, and the cycle starts all over again.
He's
I
a
think
fucking Reaper, dude.
right, like to put him in Valhalla, like as upset as Brunhilde was. She's like, why the fuck is he here? She's like, just go with it,
I had to
trust
think
me
on my
this.
feet.
Yeah, that was perfect. I love how Annabelle, who obviously was very tied to Brunhilde at one point, like switched bodies and died and brought back. But I loved how Annabelle Riggs was able to pass the baton in the way, give the seal a stamp of approval. Like, not that anybody needed to give Jane that stamp of approval, but I think in maybe some of the fans' eyes, it helped to really seal the fact that Jane is Valkyrie. Brunhilde is not coming back, sort of thing. Maybe she'll come back, but right now, Brunhilde is not
Right now,
coming
yeah.
back. Yeah.
And now we
I
have
think,
Runa. So
Runa's amazing. Like, I love it. And I love how, like, that's another thing. I love how, even though Jane is a straight woman, I love how much queer representation there is in this book. Like,
so gay.
You've got Lisa, you've got, Annabelle Riggs showing up, like Runa later on, like, maybe Danny Moonstar, that's, besides the point.
Non-binary characters in the form
Yes.
of more.
Yes. Like, it's such a great queer representation book. I love it to death. Like, but I would say I did like that ending. I did. I don't get why people would have an issue with it. I didn't read that part of it, so I don't know exactly why, but
They just felt it was too short, too quickly done. Like, oh, it's just over.
okay. If in a modern arc, yeah, that whole Reaper story would have been like 6 stories, right? This whole thing should have been broke up to 6 stories, but it's written, like you said, is more of a quick 70s, like serialization is like 2 issues.
Yeah.
Or that sort of thing. You're like, you're not gonna remember the next thing, so like, let's get it done.
It's an
like,
MTU 2-parter. Let's go, guys. Team up 2-parter.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Yeah. We didn't have like the whole Doctor Who season. It was just like that 6-episode arc. So, like, I love it. I love it. It's a nice throwback.
Now, I mean, I've read this a few times. I read it when it was coming out. I read it after that. I read it again for this. Every time I get to the end of the 5th issue, which I constantly forget is the end of the first arc anyway, because I always think there's 12 issues of this series. I don't know how I can't get it in my head that there's 10, but it's 5 issues, and then it's 5 issues, and then we got the 4-issue King and Black tie-in, and the 5-issue Mighty Valkyries. But I feel issue 5 reads like it's almost meant to be the end.
It does. When I read it, I was like, I know we're just rereading up to 5. I gotta read through 6 just to see how that starts. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, it was very like, hey, maybe we're going to get canceled final issue. Let's wrap it up kind of thing. Like, oh, good, they let us start another arc. Yay. But it was very all of your ducks in one place kind of thing.
Yeah. And, I'm really excited because it turns out that Valkyries is going to have walked away with 4 arcs, if nothing else. Doesn't look so great for another mini right now. There's nothing on the schedule, but I'm hoping maybe they're just waiting to launch till after January, something, waiting for the new year. Because I think if rereading this has told me anything about Jane, it's that this character has miles to go. She is not Lady Thor, and she is not Thor Light. She is not, a white stand-in for Storm as a lady who can wield lightning. It's nothing like that. Jane is a unique character with unique desires, wants, and motivations. I think that plays out across the page really, really clearly, issue after issue. I know that I can't wait to reread issues 6 through 10 to keep covering this with you. Now, you've already read it. There's no secrets there. There's no spoilers there for you or anything. And we've read the arcs that come after this. But what are you most excited to keep rereading Jane for? For me, it's the sense of hope. That's what Jane represents to me. She represents hope in the face of the impossible. What are you looking forward to revisiting Jane in the pages of Jane Foster Valkyries, or Valkyries Jane Foster, depending on what website you look at?
Right, my Marvel app is like, no, it's Valkyrie, Jane Foster.
Same,
Like,
right?
yeah,
Same.
I was like, isn't it Jane Foster Valkyrie? I was like,
No.
where is it? I was like, I have it. I know I do. Oh, it's under Valkyrie. But the thing that I why I want to continue to reread this, besides the crazy Alpha Flight callback and MI13 callback, coming up. Besides that, I want to keep reading it because every time I read more about Jane, I fall more in love with how deep and complex a character she is. She's not a character who's just beat cancer. She's not a character who has just had terrible losses in her life. She's not a character who is just a doctor or a superhero. There's just so much complexity and balance in that character. It's really inspiring to read, when she could just easily succumb, and her job as being a Valkyrie and a morgue assistant, she could just succumb to despair, but she chooses hope, and she chooses humor, and she chooses love, and she chooses life. Still, it's just so inspiring and amazing.
If I'm excited about something, strangely enough, I'm excited about the fact that I think the second arc being about death and the death of death, and the third arc being King in Black, I'm maybe just sort of excited to read that examination of the large scale that Jane is forced to work on after working patient by patient for so long. I think it's just a really interesting point of comparison. And I'm really excited to do volume 2 with you. I can't wait to talk about death dying.
That silly pesky death deserved to die, but then who kills after death dies? I don't know. It's a conundrum.
Poor Thanos. He's gonna have to find something to do with his Wednesdays. But until the Thanos copter makes a landing, guys, this has been Trade Waiting. I'm pretty sure we're both giving this a pretty rousing go the fuck out and read it. Just buy it. Don't even read it on Unlimited. Just go buy it.
You won't be upset. Buy it. You'll love it. Like if you love Asgard, if you love Valkyries, if you love camp, if you love good comics, if you love good art, if you love good storytelling, if you love like women, powerful women, if you love queer stories.
Pina coladas getting caught in the rain.
See, that song always makes me think of Bush by Kate Bush. So,
and if you love Kate Bush wielding a magical weapon, guys,
I really want to see that now.
I definitely need Kate Bush the Valkyrie, and obviously Tori, but definitely come check out Trade Waiting, where we're going to check out Valkyries Volume 2 before moving on to yet another amazing title from the recent vaults of Marvel. But until next time, guys, I've been Nico Action. This guy over here, what's your name again, buddy?
I think it's Nathan. It's Mr. Nathan if you want to be formal about it, but I'm just a simple Asgardian horse. I'm not a fancy pony. So,
well, then I guess that makes me Nico, Mr. Action if you're nasty, and we'll check you out next time here on X's4 Podcast.
Bye.
Hey guys, if you like that cut from X's4 Podcast, you'll be sure to like some of our other materials. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out these other amazing videos here at X's4 Podcast.